Hi, and welcome to my channel. I'm a Central Texas gardener in Zone 8B, and in today's video, I'm excited to share with you my huge front lawn reduction. I'm talking 1,100 square feet in an HOA. I want to share with you how I got through that process, what plants I used. I want to talk design concepts, rocks, boulders, a boulder fountain, and I'm just excited to take you guys along the journey with me. So I hope you guys enjoy the video.
So I'm on a 0.4 acre corner lot and I have a lot of St. Augustine lawn, which is very thirsty. And so it was really requiring a lot of water and maintenance to keep up. Plus it wasn't super interesting. And so I knew I was going to want to reduce my lawn. I had done quite a bit of that in the backyard and I was ready to take it to the front. So in October of 2024, I reduced this large corner area you see here, and I really loved how it turned out. So my goal for this particular project was to have a continuation of that throughout the front, kind of creating a perimeter. So I did hire a landscaper and he and his crew helped me with a lot of the heavy lifting. And they came out and removed the sod for me using a gas power sod cutter. And that's just my preferred method. There's other ways that you can get rid of sod, but I love the clean slate that it gives me. So next it was time to install rocks and boulders, and I had such large rocks and boulders, I definitely needed the landscape crew with their heavy moving equipment. There's a lot of reasons why you might install rocks or boulders into your landscape. One is to frame your landscape. Two is to visually break up large landscape beds. Three is they often will serve functionally as walkways, but I really like them because of their aesthetic value. I think rocks and boulders offer a more naturalistic look to landscape, and they often balance those softer lines of plants and vegetation. Here I added large flagstone to allow for a mower to be able to cross from one turf panel on one side of the sidewalk to the other.
All right, you guys can see all this work being done here on that boulder fountain. See the boulder here, and the boulder is sitting on top of a matrix, and that matrix is in a hole that's about 1.5 feet deep. You see the pump in there. Here is some sort of liner so that the water will not leak out into the soil around it. And that is getting tunneled. The electricity or the line for that is getting tunneled, or already has been tunneled, and it will run back here, and then obviously is getting plugged right here. All right, so here's the fountain up close, and let me kind of scooch back. You can see this is quite a very large boulder, and so they drilled up through the center of that boulder and kind of angled it over here so that that water would run and kind of collect in this sort of natural divot in the boulder, where it sort of then trickles down along this side. And so I've got some small flagstones stacked on top of the matrix here just to kind of blend this all together. There's some corrugated plastic drainage piping here to sort of take up the space so I don't have to put a bunch of rock in here to take up the space. And so now what's left is for me to add all the rock and just kind of fill out this space. I did get a couple more smaller boulders, moss boulders, so it would kind of look a little bit more naturalistic. This is sort of the housing for the pump, and so you could just literally lift that off and access the pump that way. So I have decided on a bit of a revamp on this boulder fountain. And that's just sometimes how it goes in landscaping. You know, you think you know what you want, then you see it in place and you have to make adjustments. So my landscaper has been so gracious to be willing to revamp this for me today. And so essentially what we're going to do is currently you can see, let me see, I don't want to get all the sun glare. You see how all the water is just kind of on this end of the boulder, but we got like all this real estate right here that's not getting any action. Also, I want to be able to see the water trickle from multiple angles around the boulder. And so what we're going to do is instead of letting that fountain, that water come out right here, we are going to kind of put it at the top here. We may have to do a little chiseling to sort of make sure that the water still kind of flows into that nice little divot there. But I want it to kind of come down back here. And then also, let me show you the back of this. You see that? It's like right here in this. So I want the water to kind of go down this way too, because what I will be planning on is I'm going to be sitting on, I'd like to be able to sit on my front patio and see the water trickle from this angle, but I also want people to be able to appreciate it from the street and also as they walk along the sidewalk. So that is the plan. All right. We're now on the third iteration of what we decided to do with the fountain, and my landscaper is now my therapist. I'm just kidding. But instead of re-drilling a new hole, he actually changed the topography of the rock so that the rock would allow for more of that water to kind of flow from all the different sides so that we could really appreciate that water flow from all angles. All right, so talking about some of the plant selections here, I did want to create a little bit of an entry. So I used taller plants to sort of frame the entry to the sidewalk. So I have a weeping yaupon holly here and a Texas sage here. This will get quite a bit bigger. And I think this weeping yaupon can get like maybe 20 feet and about 10 feet wide, but easily pruned. So coming along this way, I used several autumn sages, and these are the white variety. They get about 3 by 3 feet in height, and again are evergreen. I have found these to be a bit more dense than the red or the pink autumn sages. And then I also have, it's my favorite, this dwarf yaupon holly, which gets 3 to 4 feet in height and spread. Again, beautiful Texas evergreen. Just provides some good evergreen structure for this bed. Here I have Santolina, and this is that more icy blue color. I do have a green variety as well. This is an evergreen. Stays pretty low growing at under 2 feet, but maybe about 3 feet in spread. And so that's what I've got there. And that kind of brings us to the edge of this bed. So I'm going to turn you around to the other side. So flanking this weeping yaupon holly, I have these 2 Texas sodals, and I think these get about 3 to 4 feet in spread, and I think they stay under 3 feet in height, but you can see that they sort of have this sort of spiky texture to the leaves, and so, I'm a little nervous because I have it close to a walkway, but we'll see how big it gets. Maybe it won't be that big of a problem because I don't want anyone to get hurt walking past it. But an evergreen, and then coming along here, more dwarf yaupon holly. Here is Damianita, and Damianita is a evergreen that flowers, and so I have 3 of these here. I can't remember how big they get. I think they stay fairly small, maybe 2 to 3 feet in spread, but probably much shorter in height. I'll make sure I look that up and put that at the bottom of the video. And then I know this doesn't look like much, but here, sort of this kind of grassy stuff, I have one here, 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 and here. These are rattlesnake master, and these will actually with their flower spikes will get quite tall. They're very beautiful. I had them in my backyard, but I didn't have them in a great spot. So I thought that this would be a great way to showcase these. They're kind of toward the back of the landscape. So the fact that they get so tall shouldn't obstruct anything really back here. Coming along here, these are also backyard rescues. These are pink skullcap. And so this one looks like it's kind of struggling with the transplant, but it'll be fine. So I had that one, and then I had another little baby here that I've kind of protected in these cages so I don't accidentally step on them. And then you guys can see here more dwarf yaupon holly. And then here I have 5 Turk's caps, and these get about 5 to 6 feet in height and spread. And I hope they do okay through the winter because I've had some Turk's caps not make it. But I love these plants because they can take a pretty much a full shade and full sun setting, and they bloom and perform despite that. And I have this Monterey oak here, which will get quite large eventually, and so hopefully these will not mind that shade. Coming along here, I have a volunteer beautyberry from my backyard that I installed here, and so these are more shade lovers. So we will see how it does. Another backyard transplant. This is a sunshine ligustrum that was growing amidst all of my indigo spire salvia because I didn't space it well. So we'll see how this does. Here I have a Lindheimer senna, and these are prolific reseeders. So I had so many of these. I gave away several to friends, but they're really a really cool plant. They can get pretty big, I think somewhere around 6 feet in height and spread. And so I do have it along the back edge here of the landscape. And so hopefully that won't be obstructive at all. Here is a sea green juniper, and this is also from my backyard. Hopefully it takes the transplant well, because it is so large, and sometimes these larger plants, when you try to transplant them from the ground, they struggle a bit, but so far so good. And this is more of a wide plant, so it gets about 4 to 6 feet in height and width, and so we'll see how it does. And then here I've got a skeleton leaf goldeneye, and so I've had to cut it down because it really was looking kind of scrappy after the transplant, but you can see all that green, so it's still alive. And so you can kind of, just to orient you, so here's where we're at in the landscape. Here is a Gora, I'm not sure how to say it, that I also transplanted from the backyard and also had to kind of chop at it a bit. But you can see it's also got a little green in there, so I think we're going to be okay. And, I will also probably fill in other things in the spring, but for now I felt this was a good start. I did lay down some bluebonnet seeds here and kind of in front of that boulder over there. And then over here, I laid down a bunch of blanket flower seeds. So we'll see if those will take. We're in for quite a bit of rain, so hopefully those will do well. All right, so I'm going to take you guys around here. Here is a more mature white autumn sage that I transplanted from the backyard. Again, all the stems and things that were on it really didn't do great, so I just went ahead and pruned it. But you can see I've got lots of green popping up there, so it's doing okay. And I have another one like that over here. And so I am hoping, so I've got this white autumn sage, that one, and then I've got that grouping over there. So I'm hoping that, this repetition just helps the eye flow. Here is another Santolina, and this is a more, obviously it's green instead of that icy blue, and it is a little bit more mature. I took this from my backyard, and it did struggle a bit. I have another one that I transplanted from the backyard over there. But it looks like it's doing okay, and so I think we'll be all right. But just a beautiful evergreen. It does flower as well. And then here, I added several Wright's skullcap, and you can see those beautiful purple flowers. And everything here in this landscape looks pretty skimpy for now. And you should expect that. I always struggle because I put things too close together, and I may still have done that in some areas. But don't be discouraged. Give it a season or two. It'll really start to fill in. And so the other thing I will say, I don't know if you guys have noticed this, but as I took you through, you may have noticed a lot of grass growing here. And so I've got a couple of issues. All right, this is nut sedge, and you can usually tell because it kind of has that, if you look at the back of the leaf, it kind of has that sort of spine to it, And so I've got a lot of this nutsedge growing here. And this is a really tough thing to eradicate because it has a very extensive root system, and it spreads by rhizomes. So this is one that I will often find a targeted herbicide for and spray maybe once every 2 weeks during the growing season, just right on that. The other thing I have a lot of, um, I don't know what this is. I think maybe it's just a cool season grass here. You guys see this? And so I just kind of, I just sort of pull it up. So I don't know. This might be a losing battle here, but once a week I'll just get out here and pull whatever's growing and see what I can do. Probably better to do after a rain. I'll probably have more success. And then finally, let me take you guys down here. Okay, the other thing I have not a lot of, but some of, is this Bermuda grass. And I had a lot of volunteer Bermuda in my lawn, so I knew it'd be a bit of a problem. So for that reason, I did spray some herbicide ahead of the sod removal, but I will have to target spray these sprigs here once every 1 to 2 weeks during the growing season. All right, guys, I wanted to talk to you about mulch, but before I do, I wanted to share my cheesy garden shirt. So this says Plant Manager. Here I have a hardwood mulch, and it's not dyed, it's just naturally this color. It does gray out after a while, but with that in mind, just remember that mulch is, while it can have an aesthetic component to it, it's primarily a functional tool to help regulate water and temperature and suppress weeds. And so that's really why we use mulch. Um, Over time, especially if you've planned uh, the plant size as well, you're going to get a lot of live coverage. So hopefully you won't need as much mulch as time goes on. So I always like using the non-dyed mulches. Now, I have a confession to make. Um, Y'all, I used to spray paint my mulch. I know that's shocking, right? But listen, I know better, so I'm doing better. So now I don't use dyed mulch. I'm not saying it's a huge problem if you do, but I really like what a natural mulch can provide in terms of soil quality as it breaks down. I do not use a weed barrier primarily because I have found that it really compacts my clay soil. And so that's one reason. Another reason is that it sort of dysregulates water infiltration and evaporation. So the water doesn't infiltrate like it needs to, but when it finally does infiltrate past that weed barrier, then it doesn't sort of evaporate like it should. So then everything just kind of stays soggy. So I don't like it for that reason. But then finally, weeds just grow right on top. So I really just kind of don't see the point in it. I'm sure that there are areas and times you probably should or could use it, but I have not placed weed barrier in any of this landscape in this recent project. All right, guys, I just moved the last bit of that giant mulch pile, and that mulch pile represented about 10 cubic yards. And I can typically move about 1 cubic yard per half an hour, and so that easily represented 5+ hours of work. And so I always wish like some confetti would fall out of the sky or something for me to celebrate. So I'm celebrating with you, but I also wanted to share something that made that work a little easier for me, and that was the use of something called a transfer shovel. Okay. And that straight edge on that transfer shovel just made the whole process of moving the material so much more efficient than like a regular shovel. And I'm a little ashamed that it took me this long to figure it out, but I wanted to share that with you so you guys aren't like me, figure it out a lot sooner than I did. So you may be wondering how I'm going to keep the grass and the mulch separated in terms of edging and how to keep this nice clean line. And I really like using an invisible edge, meaning I don't really put a material between the mulch and the grass. I instead use something called trench edging or a Victorian trench, which essentially just creates a V cut right between the grass and the mulch. And I backfill it with the mulch, and that makes it easy for me to maintain the grass with a line trimmer. So I've used that trench edging along the entire edge of my lawn in the backyard. And I really like I said, the clean line it provides, but also I have an area where my rain barrel runs off. It's kind of hidden, but it comes down here, and that water just will kind of run all along that edge and sort of flow out to here where it'll eventually infiltrate. But that edge allows for redirection of water. It does need to be maintained from time to time. I'll just have to get out with my half moon spade and just clean it up. But that's the other reason I really like it is I can sort of direct water with that. So one of my other goals for these beds was to try to encompass the tree into the bed, primarily to protect it from mowers or weed whackers, because you can kind of see some of the damage to the trunk here, and sometimes that can really kill your tree. So by putting it in the bed, it just makes it easier to mow and trim around and hopefully protects the tree from further damage. As a side note, you may notice that there is no root flare on this tree exposed, and that's really not a good thing. So this tree was planted a bit too deeply. Here in the winter, I'll see if I can try to expose that, but I don't know how deep that tree is. So it is what it is, but just FYI, when you plant a tree, you want to make sure you leave that root flare exposed. All right, so this is a better setup here. Can you see how the root flare is exposed along the base of this tree? So you're looking more for something like that than what you saw previously. So this is the view from my front patio. And so I'm so excited to be sitting on my front patio here in the near future enjoying this boulder fountain. But I really feel like that weeping yopon holly and some of the plant selections here gives it a little bit of a Texas Zen vibe. And so I'm really excited to see all these plants fill in. One of the other questions you might have is, did you put any drip irrigation in here? And I did not. I didn't do it in that large bed last year, and I didn't convert any of my lawn irrigation lines to drip lines here, mostly because it would have been like a mixed irrigation. So every time the lawn would have been watered, these native plants would be watered, and they will not like that. That's just too much water. So I've been hand watering them to get them established. Once they are established, they will need very little water, maybe once every 2 to 4 weeks throughout the summer only if we haven't had a rain. So, that's the beauty of using these native and well-adapted plants. Eventually they'll get there and they'll pretty much take care of themselves. So this is my view from my dining room table now, and I am so excited to see this fill in, but this is just so much more pleasant than just staring at a whole bunch of lawn.
So I do live in an HOA, and at the time I applied for this project, the covenant stated that at least 80% of the street-facing property will be lawn. And so this particular design cut into that by quite a bit, and so initially my project was declined. But when I initially applied for this project, I made sure to emphasize that all of these plants were drought tolerant. And I think that really helped me in my rebuttal because I cited Texas Property Code 202.007, which states that HOAs cannot prohibit the installation or maintenance of drought tolerant landscaping. And so I did speak to a few HOA issues that maybe they were concerned about, primarily tidiness. So in my appeal process, I made sure that they knew that I was going to put defined borders in this landscape, and that also I would have a lot of evergreen structure so that this wouldn't just be a big dead mess in the wintertime. And so I did highlight those 2 extra features, and I'm not sure if that made a difference or not, but I wanted to let you know about that Texas property code. Even though I do most of my landscaping on my own, there's an entire team behind the scenes who helps me make it all happen. First up is Ben and Josh, a father and son team behind Grizzly's Landscape and Nursery. They've been invaluable in helping me carve out these big front yard projects. Ben, a fellow Army veteran, started out with a lawn care business, but today he runs a fantastic nursery full of beautiful trees, shrubs, annuals, veggies, and garden art. He's passionate about water conservation and loves sharing what he knows with gardeners of all experience levels. Next is Farr's Landscaping Supply, another multi-generational business. It's owned by Brandon and Bonnie, and their son Brazos, how perfect is that name, is always ready to walk you through materials and get you loaded up. I noticed he often wore these really cool belt buckles, so one day I asked him about it, and he told me that he used to show hogs in the FFA. Through hard work and dedication, he won Reserve Supreme Champion at the Texas State Fair, and I thought that was pretty cool. And last but definitely not least is Mike. He's retired now, but he delivers small loads for FARs, and every time he pulls up, he shouts, "Is there a hardworking lady here?" And it always makes me smile. I'm so grateful for all these folks. They remind me that it really takes so many different pieces to put together a project, and even more, how meaningful it is to be in a community with people who bring unique backgrounds and experiences. I've said it before on this channel, life is so much sweeter when we stop and take the opportunity to truly see the person in front of us.
So I hope you guys enjoyed that video and you found some helpful information. Let me know what plants you would recommend filling in some of these empty spaces, like right around here, and what you learned in the video that you plan on implementing in your own landscape. And until the next one, y'all take care.